Hello and welcome to the channel where I explore concepts of creativity and the arts, as well as some simple psychology, mental health and wellness ideas, kind of how the two connect back to each other. This is actually part 2 of a video I did on critical thinking. So in part 1, I went over sort of the definition, a very simple way to understand what it actually is, and what are the 6 main skills involved in critical thinking. If you're curious about that, you can check out the link here. But in this video, I'm looking at very simply how to learn critical thinking skills. How can we develop this tendency? What are some simple real-life examples? Because I guarantee you already do a lot of critical thinking in your daily life. And then I want to get into my own personal favorite technique and practice for exercising critical thinking that I just find to be really fun and satisfying in my snobby artist brain. So you can do that too, or your own version of it, because, and this is something I feel really strongly about, there is some bias out there or understanding that critical thinking is really intellectual and it takes a lot of work, and frankly that it's really boring, and that is not true. It can and should be really fun, because learning and analyzing things and digging into the world around us is fun. So we can look at how to develop our analytical and critical thinking skills in a way that's really enjoyable. So that's basically the theme for this video. And I think that's all I had for the intro, so let's get into it. So characteristics that can help us develop some of these critical thinking skills. It helps enormously. It's very important. You really won't successfully do any critical thinking if you can't be a little bit open-minded. I have another video here on that concept. I love it. I might have to do another one on it because it's so satisfying to research. But to be open-minded essentially means that you're open to having your own ideas and opinions challenged. You need to be able to accept new ideas, because if you don't have any openness, there's no willingness to be challenged, then you don't really want to research and really want to question your own bias and find the best solution because you believe you have the best solution. Make sense? So we need to be open-minded. That's a huge one. It helps to have respect for evidence and reasoning. We don't want to be led by our emotions if we're trying to do good critical thinking. So if you have a little streak of the Sherlock Holmes or a doctor or someone really professional and lined up, and you want to check the boxes and do it right, that will help you do good critical thinking. It's really helpful to have some cognitive flexibility. And this is something I would like to look into more, but very simply, it seems like cognitive flexibility is when you're able to change your way of thinking or your strategy based on what's happening around you. So if you have a plan or a way of thinking about something, new information comes in and the situation has changed, you need to be able to adapt. That's a little bit of cognitive flexibility. It helps to value clarity and precision. So to make sure when people say things that they're saying them clearly, when you say things that you're saying them clearly, and being really precise and actually getting across the meaning that you intend, and to value that from other people and care whether or not you're getting the proper information as clearly as possible. It also helps to be skeptical, which I personally think is so fun and satisfying. When you're given a story, to say, yeah, but is that true though? But is that true? I mean, not to be a mean person about it, but yes, to ask the questions. This goes with the curiosity, not to take things for granted when we're told one thing is true and another is not, but to really ask, who is telling me this? Do they have an ulterior motive? Why is this being presented to me? Just to be skeptical. And then to apply some metacognition, to think about your own thinking. This is so important. And I have another video on mindfulness, which kind of is related to this topic. How can we be more aware of ourselves and what's going on interiorly and in our own thinking? If we're not aware of our own thoughts, we will not be challenging our own bias. We need to be able to have some exercises and practice to help us be more aware of how we think. So cool. So some really basic, easy examples of how we do this in our everyday lives, and probably how you already apply some critical thinking. So one from my own life, I teach music lessons. So I will be teaching a kid piano, and it's happened so many times where I will be showing them a new section of the music. I'll be like, okay, play right here. And they'll try and it'll go badly. And I will explain it to them 2 or 3 times, the mistake that they're making. and it will not work. They will not understand. So then I immediately have to do some critical thinking and say, okay, what is going on in this situation? Why are the wires crossed? Why are they not understanding what I'm saying? And how can I say it differently? And it's very small and it's very fast, but I have to do this constantly to be any good at my job and say, what else can we try? Because you are not understanding what I'm putting down. And that's my job as the teacher, is to find a new way to come up with a better solution to the problem at hand. Most of us, to be any good at our jobs, use critical thinking. Let's say you're a pizza delivery guy and you need to meet your route in a certain amount of time and you can see there's a traffic jam and you sit down and you make a plan for an alternate route. That may not seem like critical thinking, but it is. You're debating your best option, you're solving a problem, you're figuring out how to get your job done a little bit more efficiently than if you had just taken for granted your normal route. Anytime we're debating what life choice to make, if you ever decided which college to go to, you did probably a lot of critical thinking to make a decision like that. Anytime we make any decision, but especially our big life choices, hopefully we're taking time. We're really weighing the pros and cons. We're doing research. We're asking other people their opinions. We're gathering information and then we're evaluating what's the best. We're trying to be aware of our bias. Do I want to go somewhere because my family went there, or is it actually the best place for me? We do a lot of critical thinking when we're making big life decisions. Or at least we should. We definitely should. You can see why it's so important for something like this. Anytime you play a strategy game, right? If you like cards, if you play chess, anytime you're playing a strategy game, yes, some video games count. And there's an argument on the flip side for how computers and video games are killing our critical thinking, and I'm sure in some ways they are. But if you're playing a game that forces you to make really quick decisions and figure out the best options so that your character doesn't die, you're doing some critical thinking. Anytime you've debated with a friend about a movie or a show, or debated with them about a game, you're doing a lot of critical thinking. Anytime you've doubted a political or social figure and thought, I don't think they mean what they're saying, that's critical thinking. Okay, so those are some basic examples. I want to give you my quick personal favorite exercise, is to really pick apart any kind of entertainment media. So if you're watching a movie, you're watching a TV show, if you're watching if you're watching the news, which isn't meant to be entertainment media, listening to music. Because I come from a family of kind of intellectual, but art snobs, I have a mindset for really taking in art very critically and saying, yeah, well, what are they trying to do here? How well did they achieve their goals? The really fun thing to also ask is, what are these people, these artists, these creative people, what are they trying to get me to think? This is super fun to do anytime you watch an advertisement as well, because it's kind of easy with ads. Say, what are you trying to get me to think, and how do I feel about that, and how well are you conveying your point? And it allows me to think really critically without getting into arguments with people I know, although then you can debate with them about whether or not the movie was any good, and that's really fun too. And it's my favorite thing. I think it's so fun. Critical thinking means thinking critically. For me, means I get to watch something and be a snob. I just get to list out all the reasons I think they didn't do as well as they could. It's so satisfying. The next time you watch a film, try being a movie critic a little bit. Ugh, what a good time. But think about it, something you love, right? You might not be a little bit of a film nerd. I kind of am. If there's something else you really love, just indulge in being really critical and analytical of that experience and that process. If you're a foodie and you love going to new restaurants, you're probably used to going into cool places and having a whole list of opinions about the atmosphere and the food and the whole experience. So the more we have like curiosity and interests and things in life that we love, the more naturally critical we become of times when it's not done really well. I love movies. So when I watch a movie that has a really promising cast and a really interesting storyline and then it's terrible, of course I'm critical. I'm disappointed. I am offended. I have strong opinions about it. And that's not inherently a bad thing. You don't want to be a jerk and like tell everyone in the world that this thing that they love is awful, if that's the case. But it's not a bad thing to be critical. That's kind of a big part of how critical thinking works. Try not to take everything for granted. Ask who's involved and why. Especially ask, what are people trying to get me to think? That's my favorite question. and you'll be really exercising that muscle. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful and that you feel like you have a better understanding of the strategies and kind of some of the ways we can really get into this concept. Again, if you're interested in that first video on kind of the definition, that might be helpful to get a little bit of a firmer sense on the terms I'm using and how I'm referencing this way of thinking. Regardless, I hope you found this helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time.